Welcome to night number 54 of History Bedtime Stories. In bed, in our pajamas. Tonight is night number 2 of 3 in the founding of Detroit. Where we left off last night was that Cadillac had gone back to France in shame. He is on this whiny poor me tour where he's talking about the fact that everybody's plotting against him, that there are these wicked plots afoot to ruin him, and that none of it's ever been his fault, ever. Well, while in France, he meets up with our old friend, the Minister of Colonies, Pontchartrain. And Pontchartrain and he sort of hatched this idea that a colony built on the strait, on what will become the Detroit River, would have great trading and military positioning for France in the New World. They proposed this to the king at the Palace of Versailles, and for many, many months, they talk to the court. They kind of backroom deals, and they whisper incentives, and they convince the court that yes, this fort is exactly what France needs. On May 27th, 1699, King Louis says, do it. He decrees that a fort will be built for the French on what will become the Detroit River. He gives 6 mandates to Cadillac that have to be done as part of the fort. First, a permanent beaver trade, wrestling that out of the hands of the Iroquois Native Americans to control the beaver trade on the Detroit River and in lower what will become Michigan by this fort. Secondly, deliver high quality pelts. Beaver skin hats, beaver capelets, beaver skin boots. These have become the height of fashion in France, and the king mandated, look, we're sick of all the cheap stuff. We're sick of all the subpar pelts. Part of your job is to send us the highest quality pelts that can get the most money. Third, ensure work for the Cours de Bourse. Now, the Cours de Bourse is a lot of fun to say, but what they actually were journeymen. They were independent contractor tradesmen who were French or Canadian and survived in the wilderness as hunters, trappers, and traders, working as intermediaries between the Native American and First People tribes and the new conquering French. As a fort, your job was to guarantee medical treatment, supplies, and trading for the Cours de Bourse. Fourth, generate benefits for merchants. Pretty obvious. Have a trade day, have a market. Fifth, reunite the Allied native forces to France. Basically, get in there and stop the Native Americans and the First Nations people from trading and forming alliances with the British. Bring them back home to the French. And fifth, missionaries. Now, in history, missionaries are a very touchy subject, so I'm simply going to say the French Catholic missionaries were an integral part of the fort, and from the get-go, from the French crown, part of how Cadillac got the decree to set up what would become the city of Detroit eventually was that he was spreading the Catholic faith through missionaries. When Cadillac returns to North America, he's in Quebec, and the discussion really turns into Versailles in Paris, the palace, versus Quebec in Canada. And Quebec really was much more realistic about this. They're sort of looking at this decree, they're looking at these 6 mandates, and they're sort of saying, that's a lot, that's hard, those aren't easily met goals, and we don't know if Cadillac's the man to do it. Boots on the ground, we don't know if this is the guy. Meanwhile, back at the palace, you have all the courtiers who have been wooed and celebrated by Cadillac saying, that's our man. Eventually, the palace wins out, and Cadillac himself is quoted as saying, either the plan is good or bad. If it's good, then it should be carried out by the best man available. He meant himself. But he does win, and on June 5th of 1701, he sets out with 100 men. Half of them are soldiers, half of them are colonists. Then there's an additional group of native First Nationer Canadians and Native Americans who choose to join on with the expedition, and of course, 2 missionaries. They travel for a month and 3/4. They are gone for 9 weeks, and they take a route so complex I had to make notes to get it right. They take the northern route. It goes first to the St. Lawrence River, then the Ottawa River, then Lake Nipissing, then the French River, then Georgian Bay, then Lake Huron, then the St. Clair River, followed by Lake St. Clair, all before getting into the Detroit River. On July 23rd of 1701, they camp overnight on an island that will become Gros Isle. But on July 24th, 1701, they load up all of their equipment. They get into their long outrigger canoes, and as they paddle, Cadillac is scanning the river. He is looking for the perfect location to build his fort, his shining city on a hill, and he knows in his mind what he wants. He wants the high ground. This is true whether you're having a nerf fight with your little sister or you are building a military fort. You want the high ground. You want to be able to look down on anyone approaching. You want to be able to see for a long, long way. And most importantly, you want to be able to shoot down instead of having to shoot up. It's a much better military setup. So he's looking for a ridge or a hill or a height. He also wants a spot where the river narrows. If the river narrows, any approaching armada or group of ships would have to go in a single file or lessen their approach, making it easier to defend the fort. He finds that spot very near where Hart Plaza sits in Detroit today. At the time, what's today Jefferson Avenue would have been the border, the cliff falling off into the river. It was over a 30-foot fall, straight down, cliff to the water. It was a rise, and with the river narrowing, and with Belle Isle in the river to the south, anyone approaching out of Lake St. Clair would have had to split their armada to get around the island. It was perfect. So on July 24th, they row ashore, they climb up that cliff, and for God, king, and country, Cadillac plants the French flag into the muddy shore. That becomes the outpost of what will grow into Fort Pontchartrain du Detroit, Fort Pontchartrain on the Strait. Pontchartrain named for the Minister of Colonies, who has really been his investor, his backer all of these years, and Detroit, the Strait, named for the river. It would eventually grow and anglicize into Detroit from Detroit, and tomorrow we'll cover what happens once the fort is built. Wash your hands. We'll see you tomorrow night.